If the Miami Hurricanes basketball team ends up with a 5 seed in the NCAA tournament, yeah, people like me and you are going to be pissed about that. We're going to feel disrespected. But here's something Jim Larranaga seems to care about more than the seed number.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno, your host. I'm a University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and contributor to allhurricanes.com. And thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first and your second listen today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. So my heart finally stopped pounding after that narrow, thrilling victory, 2-point win. The Canes basketball team got over Pittsburgh. Winner takes all. ACC champs. Well, technically a share of the ACC title with Virginia, but your Miami Hurricanes have the number 1 seed and, of course, a double bye in the ACC tournament coming up. Are they finally respecting Miami the way that they should? Well, if you look at Joe Lunardi's bracketology, the latest projection has Miami, despite winning the ACC regular season title, how far they go in the ACC tournament could, of course, improve their standings. But Joe Lunardi has the Miami Hurricanes as a 5 seed right now. What is this team has to do? And the Hurricanes, they move up a couple of spots in the new polls. The Associated Press poll, the coaches poll, they're 13th in the coaches poll. They're 14th in the AP poll. They're 1 spot behind Virginia, despite the fact that Miami's got the head-to-head win over Virginia, which is the reason why the Hurricanes are the 1 seed in the ACC tournament. But I think the most important thing is, with the way this Miami Hurricanes basketball team is constructed, with their athleticism and just their depth and versatility, I'm not saying that they're that deep of a team just in terms of sheer numbers, but in terms of who can beat you, they're deep, right? Because as we've seen throughout the year, even if Isaiah Wong is not at his best, Nigel Pack can beat you, or Jordan Miller, the most underrated player in the country who can do a lot of everything, can beat you. Wooga Poplar can beat you. Wooga, in that win over Pittsburgh, he was shooting unconscious, 6 for 8 from 3-point range, a team high 18 points on the day. Here's, though, what scares me heading into the NCAA tournament, where Miami's going to be the type of team that nobody wants to face. But then at the same time, these late game situations, I told you my heart finally started beating at kind of a normal pace a couple of days after this game. But, we've seen this time and time again. You saw the way Miami lost to Pittsburgh in the first matchup a little over a month ago. They did get him this time, though. But Miami in this game had a 7-point lead with 30 seconds left in the basketball game. Yet somehow it comes down to a final shot where Pittsburgh missed what would have been a circus 3-point attempt, but the type that Blake Hinson was making, he had already made a circus 3 a little bit earlier. So thankfully that last shot didn't go in, because Miami would have lost on that buzzer beater had it gone in. And the Hurricanes were able to storm the court, cut down the nets, and celebrate. And, obviously Miami's going to be dancing in the NCAA tournament. We just have to see how high they get seeded in that tournament. But here's what Jim Larranaga actually cares more about, okay? I was listening to Coach L this morning on the Joe Rose Show on AM 560 Sports WQAM, which actually, shameless plug, I'm going to be hosting that show the rest of the week. If you tune in the next few days on 560 between 6 a.m. to 10 a.m., so if you get us during your morning commute, I'm going to be hosting that show alongside former Miami Hurricanes football player Brian Monroe. So we're going to have a lot of fun the rest of the week. But Coach L was talking with Joe this morning, and he said, he's not stressing about the seed that they get, but what's important to Coach L is when we're all watching on Selection Sunday, and I know, of course, the team will all be watching together, Coach L really wants Miami to be placed in Orlando to start the tournament, okay? that's what he's going to care, because obviously we all want Miami to be a 2 seed or a 1. I don't think a 1 is even possible. I doubt they're going to give Miami a 2 seed either. But Coach L wants Miami to be able to open up their tournament in Orlando, and they could do that with options. 2 4 seeds and 2 5 seeds would be available in Orlando, and Miami, of course, is projected right in that range. In fact, Joe Lunardi's bracketology would have Miami as a 5 seed opening up against 12 seed Drake in Orlando. That's exactly where he's got Miami. So Coach L, and the reason why, because you're like, well, what does he get? Does he want to go to Epcot or something? Like, why does Coach L want to be in Orlando? Very simple. Easy for the Miami Hurricanes fans to travel. And, there are, of course, alumni all over the state of Florida. Some of you watching this and listening to this might live closer to Orlando than you live to Miami anyway. And Miami fans would travel to watch the first, hopefully multiple games in the NCAA tournament in Orlando, because Coach L wants that first game being situated close enough to South Florida for a lot of Miami Hurricanes to be able to get to, a lot of Hurricanes fans, I should say, and just take that arena over. So Jim Larranaga, he seems like it's more urgent to him to be in Orlando than to be the highest seed possible. That might just be something he says because he doesn't want to piss off the selection committee or the bracketology gods. Because usually teams that win the NCAA tournament are teams that get a 1 seed or a 2 seed. But at the same time, you had a 10 seed Miami team last year get all the way to the Elite 8. Right? Larranaga once had a Cinderella George Mason team all the way into the Final Four. So he's thinking more about convenience and location for Miami's fans right now than he is about the seed number. And another thing on that Hoops win on Saturday that impressed the hell out of me, despite the fact that Miami didn't finish the game strong enough. They made us sweat during those final seconds, but they murdered Pittsburgh on the boards. 42-20, Miami out-rebounded the Panthers. 42-20. And that's for an undersized team, right? The athleticism and the discipline with which they play, they are able to compensate for their lack of size. And it's really, really a beautiful thing to watch. And I'm hoping for a deep run for this Miami Hurricanes basketball team in the NCAA tournament. So this is our second episode of the day. There's more football and basketball, but mostly football questions from you guys that I want to get to. You've been tweeting the show at Locked On Canes. And if you follow us on Twitter at Locked On Canes, we will follow you back and we might answer your tweets on the show. It's a beautiful thing. We're going to do some of that right here on Locked On Canes right after we talk about Built Bar. I just ate a Built Bar. I had the chocolate peanut butter granola bar. Built, I'm telling you, they make some of the best granola bars. There's so many varieties. So if you're looking for a delicious treat, but you don't want all the fat and calories, you've got to try a Built Bar. I've been trying to eat healthier in 2023, but I also don't want to compromise taste. If you're like me, I've got just the thing for you. You got to try Built. With Built, healthy is actually tasty. Seriously, they're so delicious. You're not going to think that they're good for you, but they're perfect for you. What makes Built Bars so good? For starters, they're all covered in 100% real chocolate, and they come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, coconut almond. I'm not sure how Built does it, but these bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. Only 130 calories, just 4 grams of sugar, but a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't even need to wait around to get a box. Now you can still order your Built Bars at Built.com with our promo code LOCKEDON15 for 15% off. But now you can also get them at your local Walmart and Sam's Club. That's right. Head into your nearest Walmart today. Walk to the pharmacy section. Grab yourself a box. If you're close to a Sam's Club, run in, grab a 13-bar box with hit flavors like brownie batter and churro. And yeah, you can thank me later because I love me some Built Bars. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. Get a question from Chalupa Batman, who's one of our favorites out there. And I will be at the second Miami Hurricanes spring football practice tomorrow. They have not practiced since the opening practice on Saturday. I was out there. I made a lot of observations. We made an episode about that. If you want to go back and check it out, available free, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Odyssey, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. So Chalupa Batman asks, with all the depth in Miami's offensive backfield this year, I can see multiple guys getting significant reps, but who do you see making the most out of their playing time in the backfield this year? So for last year, no question, Henry Parrish. Henry Parrish made the most out of his playing time last year. He was Miami's most consistent back by a country mile. Okay. So listen, a part of me could see him as the incumbent doing that. But like Chalupa hints at, there's so much depth in Miami's backfield, but there's so many question marks. Okay. On Saturday, a tear nearly rolled down my eye, a happy tear, because I was watching a fully healthy Don Chaney, right? If he can somehow maintain that into and throughout the regular season, who's to say Don Chaney, who's well-rounded as anything, who's to say Chaney can't be the guy who makes the most of his playing time if he can stay on the field to consistently get that playing time, all right? Some guys that we didn't watch in spring practice because they're not participating in spring, one of those, Trevante Citizen, it's hard for me to project where he's at health-wise because he's doing some off-season stuff, some training, but they're keeping him out of spring drill participation because he had ACL surgery back in August. So he's still recovering. Like he's still in a rehab phase, Trevante Citizen. But I looked that dude straight in the eyes. I was a few feet away from him last year. He's built like an NFL back. So I could see Trevante Citizen. And then a couple of other question marks because these guys are not on campus yet. Neither of the true freshman running backs are enrolled early. Mark Fletcher, that's definitely a candidate to make the most out of his playing time because Mark Fletcher, you would never guess he's 18 years old, should be finishing. Well, he is literally finishing high school right now because he's not enrolled early. And Chris Johnson is going to be probably the fastest player on the team when he arrives, another true freshman. He's out of Dillard, Fletcher's out of American Heritage. I think both of those guys could make the case. So if to say Henry Parrish, if that's too boring of an answer, and it might be, okay, I'm going to say Mark Fletcher, right? Because Mark Fletcher, unlike Trevante Citizen right now, Fletcher is completely healthy. Don Chaney might be healthy right now, but you hold your breath because he's had such terrible luck in the past. And, Chris Johnson, I think, can make a real impact in explosive plays, but I don't think just body-wise he's going to be ready day one to be as complete of a back as Mark Fletcher. So I think I talked myself into thinking Fletcher. I could definitely see him getting some burn and some playing time year one. He'll be around for fall camp, of course, though he's not around for spring because I just think Fletcher, he's built like a battering ram, but he's also faster than you think, and he's more of a weapon in the passing game than you think. If you were like me and you watched him in the Under Armour All-America game a couple months ago, you saw him catch, what was it, a 65, 70-yard touchdown pass, and he was burning his way down the field. I think that's a pretty good bet that Fletcher, even as a true freshman, is going to find a way to have an impact this year. All right. Our friend Rubicon writes to us. Now, some context on this. It is Rubicon's quest in life. Like some of us, our mission in life is to establish world peace, right? That might be your mission in life. Rubicon's mission in life is he wants the University of Miami to start using Phil Collins' In the Air Tonight as the intro song when they're running through the smoke. Like he wants that. What do they even, I know they use In the Air Tonight. They use it for stretching. What did they do? Rock You Like a Hurricane when they're I don't even know. This goes to show you how much I pay attention to when they're running through the smoke. I'm more concerned with the visual of it than the audio experience of it. But Rubicon desperately wants them to use In the Air Tonight when they're running through the smoke. And he says to me, is there an intro update? In the Air Tonight, this needs to be changed. For some reason, Rubicon thinks I'm the DJ at the stadium or I have the power to make that change. I do not. I can make the suggestion, though. If anyone from the athletic department is watching this, noted, all right? Just write it down in your little spiral notebook that we here on Locked On Canes, because you know what? I'm going to go in with Rubicon on this. We here on Locked On Canes would like to use In the Air Tonight, like right when he starts playing the drums, that the smoke starts going off and they run through the tunnel, and then you've got those fireworks, the pyros are going out there. I think that'd be pretty cool. So, if anyone Dan Radakovich, if you're watching this or listening to this, just jot it down in your notebook. Let's think about doing this for next year, all right? Let's see. We got a question from Javier. He gives me a two-parter here. He says, what's the bigger concern, receiver or cornerback at this point? I've heard other news outlets talk about corner being a huge concern and could be bigger concern than receiver. I think they could definitely use more depth and more young depth at cornerback because they've got some solid veterans coming in. Terry Roberts from Iowa, great cover corner from the Big Ten. He's coming in. He's got, I think, just 1 year of eligibility left, but I think Terry is going to do a good job in that defensive backfield. And Devontae Brown from UCF, who's got 2 years of eligibility left, so he's a bit longer term, but he's not going to be around forever. I think both of these guys can be candidates to start. Okay. And yeah, you've got some really good young guys coming in the form of Damari Brown and Robert Stafford. And I think Antoine Jackson's going to be a Cane. I mean, I'm going to assume that until I'm told otherwise. He can provide, certainly some depth in the slot in the future. But yeah, I mean, corner, I would love to see Miami go out there and grab a guy like Jaheim Singletary in the transfer portal. And he does plan to visit later this month. He's a former 5-star recruit, and Singletary, he's got all of his eligibility left, right? Because he only 1 year out of high school was on Georgia last year, decided to transfer. So I don't know, maybe he's only got 3 years left, but it's almost like bringing in a freshman if you bring in a guy like Jaheim Singletary. So I think Miami could add some depth there, but I feel pretty good about like the top 3 or 4 guys at cornerback this coming year. Wide receiver, there's just so much unproven on that unit. So I'm still going to say, Javier, to answer the first part of your question, that I think wide receiver is probably the bigger concern because Miami's got plenty of talent there. In terms of obviously they're loaded in the slot, and then in terms of the outside guys, you just haven't seen anybody do it consistently, right? Can Colby Young, do for 12 games what he did for about 2.5 games last year? Can Jacoby George do it consistently? Can Frank Ladson have like the breakout year at Miami we were hoping he would have last year after transferring from Clemson? Michael Redding, Isaiah Horton. So I'm still a little bit more concerned about receiver, but I think these guys are going to benefit from the new offense because I think the new offense is a lot more receiver friendly. And I'm curious to see what their position coach, Kevin Beard, can do with them because I'm a huge fan of KB. So the second part of his question is, what possible changes in position could we see from some of the current roster, and how soon would we see those changes come into play during practice? I don't know if I'm expecting guys to change positions. I mean, some of the players that have come in are, considered like athlete, like Collins at Chiampong, but we already know he's going to play defense. Like he's going to play defensive end. So that's not really like changing position. He just wasn't like officially assigned a position when he was recruited, and I think you could see some players used in creative ways, like a guy like Jaleel Skinner, who's technically a tight end on the roster. I think you could see him lined up wide a lot. It wouldn't surprise me if you saw somebody like Brashard Smith lined up maybe at running back sometimes, though he's a receiver, or Chris Johnson, who's a receiver, Chris Johnson's a running back. Maybe you see him lined up at receiver sometimes. And then like all the offensive linemen, they're all going to cross train. We know that's happening. Jalen Rivers talked about it, and they all talked about it last year as well. In spring and fall camp, you're going to see the offensive linemen playing multiple different spots in practice, right? Like you'll see Jalen Rivers maybe one practice lined up at left tackle, then lined up at right tackle. In the next practice, you're going to see some guys switching between guard and tackle spots. I'm sure that the incoming freshmen, like Antonio, excuse me, what happened there? Guys like Antonio Tripp and Okunlola and Maui Goa are going to be moving around along. I'm sure you'll see Tripp. Probably won't see him too much at tackle, but you'll probably see him between center and guard sometimes. And then Maui Goa and Okunlola, you'll see them at center and tackle sometimes. So, like, I don't know. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong on this, guys, but I'm not expecting anything earth-shattering like, I'm not expecting like any of the cornerbacks to switch over to receiver, or any of the receivers to switch to corner, or like a linebacker switch to tight end. Like I'm not expecting anything like that. I think that kind of what you see is what you get in terms of what positions guys play. Maybe you'll see some of the safeties in the corners moving around a little bit, but I think the roles could be different. Like Wes Basaint at linebacker talked about how in the new defense, the linebackers are doing a lot more in coverage than they did in the previous defense. So you're going to see some of the roles change a little bit, but I don't think you're going to see too many like position reassignments happening. We get a question from Pat Mack who asks, "Hey, quick question. Historically, how much does the new offensive coordinator use his tight ends?" Shortly after he was hired, we did kind of a segment about this with Shannon Dawson. He definitely, just in terms of targets, like in the passing game, I'm sure you're talking about, right? Like in terms of targets, he definitely like used his tight ends a little bit less than what Miami fans might be used to, but I think that had a lot to do with his personnel because Shannon Dawson, like he even said it after he was hired at Miami. One of the interviews he did, he said, "This is on paper probably the most talented tight end group he's ever had." Like he just didn't have horses at Houston or even West Virginia like he has here at Miami, right? So I think that's something where he's going to adapt to the personnel because like the top tight end at Houston last year didn't have as many targets or catches as Will Mallory, who was the top tight end target at Miami last year. Boy, congratulations to Will Mallory. Blazing speed, fastest tight end at the combine running the 40. That was incredible. And Tyreek Stevenson had a good showing at the combine as well. So it's great to see the Canes doing big things out there. So, I think that when you look at guys like Elijah Arroyo, once he gets healthy, and Jaleel Skinner and Jackson Carver and Riley Williams, I think he's just gonna have to use these guys more and line them up in creative ways. So I think even though historically I don't think Dawson maybe uses the tight ends as much as Miami fans are used to, I think he might just adapt that to the personnel that he has in front of him. Okay. And speaking of tight end, I don't think I mentioned this on a show the last couple days. Best of luck to Khalil Brantley. Khalil Brantley, former now Miami tight end, has decided to hit the transfer portal. So he was a late scratch from spring football because he's leaving the team. And for Khalil, go be great, man. Very, very talented pass catching tight end. I can't speak for him necessarily because I have not spoken to him about exactly why he's transferring, but just my guess would be it's just a numbers game. I mean, Miami has so much depth at tight end. I think Brantley realizes I could probably get more playing time somewhere else. And that's, to me, I know that a lot of fans don't necessarily like the transfer portal because you hate the idea, players move around so much. But keep in mind, folks, look at it from their perspective, right? If these guys have a dream of, playing professional football, I'm sure they'd prefer the NFL over the XFL and USFL. But these guys, they want to play professional football, but they just want to play. Like college football in itself is part of that dream that they get to live. Okay. And, to actually be on the field, if Khalil Brantley doesn't feel like he could get that consistently at Miami, then go find somewhere. I mean, I'd prefer it if you don't go to Florida or Florida State, but anywhere else you want to go, Khalil, I will wish you best of luck, my friend. Even if he did go to one of the rivals, he's still a really nice dude. I would wish him the best of luck. But Miami did lose a tight end from their roster. Paul Erickson asks, he says, "I'll do a fill in the blank. We know our coordinators are significantly impacting the squad if blank." Okay, I'll answer this. We know our coordinators are significantly impacting the squad if we score more points and give up less points than we did last year. How about that? And if we win more games, I think that's all we're looking for. On offense, balance is important. But the big thing is getting the passing game off the runway, right? Because it's, not only are explosive passing plays going to help you win more games, but they're also going to help you win more recruits, right? Because there's a lot of really good wide receivers that are going to South Florida high schools right now who are not going to want to stay at the crib and play at Miami if Miami's offense is boring and they're not putting up numbers through the passing game. And then, of course, the more 70-yard touchdowns you throw, you're probably winning more games if you do that. And then on defense, I would like to see maybe a little bit less of the herky-jerky rotations that we were constantly seeing. Like, feel free to give a guy like Leonard Taylor a few more snaps this coming season. Let's help get a little bit more consistency out of James Williams, although I do sympathize for James because I know he was playing through injury last year, and I think people are a little bit maybe too hard on his tackling because he was playing through a shoulder injury. But this really needs to be a year where he hits the big time. I don't really have to say too much about Cam Kinchins because I know Cam's going to be solid, right? I know that Cam Kinchins is going to end up, I'm sure, being the best safety or one of the best 2 or 3 safeties in the country this year, no matter what, because he's got an amazing head on his shoulders and he studies like crazy and he's got the athleticism to go along with that. But, and let's give up a few less of those 80-yard touchdowns, those 75, 80-yard touchdowns that we were giving up last year. So that's the way I will answer that. But really, score more points, give up less points, and then we're going to know the coordinators are having an impact. All right, folks. Thank you so much for taking extra time out of your Monday. This is our second episode of the day. If you missed our first, they should be giving you a link within any second. If you're watching on YouTube, they should be giving you a link to click on our most recent episode. If you're listening to the audio version, check that out. And we'll talk to you again later on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.